Howdy feller, it's your boy Quarantine Rides, and I'm currently mourning that I won't ride Olympia Looping because Corona was like, hey. So while I sit my ass at home, I thought I'd let you know what my ideal theme park would be, especially after the Mike M4 gave me the idea. Subscribe to him, darling. He plays Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 like a real fucking man. Basically, what I'm gonna do is show you what rides I would put into a theme park. I have all sorts of musts that I think the ideal theme park should have. If a theme park doesn't meet these exact requirements, they're just pussy parks. Only my park is good enough to visit. Cedar Point ain't got shite on this place I'm about to create, folks. Alright, enough with me failing at being funny. I'm going to make a list of a bunch of rides that I feel like my ideal theme park would need. I'll first go over the roller coasters, then flat rides, water rides, and others. I won't go into too much detail, we've got a lot to cover. Every park needs a kiddie coaster in my opinion, something small for the smallest kiddos to ride. It's a great way of introducing kids to the world of coasters from a very early age, and in my opinion, the best coaster for this is actually a classic Zero Tivoli coaster. The small model too. According to RCDB, these are still in production and they have a very specific feel that has a specific charm which I loved as a kid, which is why I'm choosing this over a Force model. To amp it up, we also need a basic family coaster, one with no special tricks up its sleeve, like a Vekoma Jr. coaster or an Intamin family coaster. One of the best models for this job, in my opinion, is the McFerren Youngstar, a standard family coaster with some fun twists and elements to introduce the younger group to different kinds of forces for the first time. We also need a family coaster with a special trait. This can be something like a powered coaster, a bobsled, a drop track coaster, or something else. I'm choosing a suspended family coaster, specifically a Vekoma suspended family coaster to take the standard family coaster and provide twists with slightly more thrill. Of course, we also need an iconic family coaster, one that I simply can't stop myself from adding. A Wild Mouse. Don't worry, it won't be a standard layout. I did first think about just the standard Wild Mouse Compact Mobile Rift 2 model from Mack Rides, but then I realized that Gerstlauer's bobsleds are also Wild Mouse coasters, but much better and more flexible. This model has the classic hairpin turns and some of the best ones, by the way, but it also has helixes and better hills. Now, what is a park without a 4D coaster? I don't mean something like an Intamin sack spin or an SFS free spin, I mean a more family-friendly version, a spinning coaster. Now, since we've already had a Wild Mouse, this won't be a spinning coaster with the same style of hairpin turns, so no Reverchon or Fabry models. Instead, I thought a spinning coaster from Mauro Rides seemed perfect, something like the SC2200 model, which is what Alton Tower's Spinball Whizzer is. This will provide a family-friendly but still decently thrilling experience with some cool elements and perspectives added to the experience. In my opinion, every park on Earth needs more than just steel coasters. I personally think every park should have a proper wooden roller coaster, not just hybrids but actual woodies with classic woody feels. First, I was thinking a real classic like an old PTC, but taking into consideration that this is a new park opening today, that won't be a possibility. Instead, I'm choosing a GCI. I won't choose something with focus on airtime, as that will come later. Instead, this coaster will have a pure focus on speed and chaos, which is what modern day GCI does so well. And that was my favorite part about Wodan in Europa Park. That focus will also make it more unique compared to the rest of the park's coasters, which we will get into shortly, as we have moved into the thrill coaster zone now. Next up is a looping coaster, and this will be a standard looping coaster with the sole focus of going through iconic inversions. This could be many different things such as a B&M flawless coaster, but I actually chose an Intamin multi-inversion coaster for its more traditional sit-down style of ride, and because the cloned models such as the 8 inversion and the 10 inversion layouts have all the classic looping maneuvers. It has the vertical loop, the corkscrew, the cobra roll, and the hardline roll. This ride isn't about introducing riders to inversions, but rather about enjoying inversions and simply going upside down. But we obviously also need a special kind of looping coaster. Just like with the family coasters, this will also have a special trait to make it more unique. And I'll be honest, I'm thinking a B&M dive coaster. It's like a flawless coaster, except it has the major drop with the holding brake to really catch the attention of the general public. It won't be too big, not like Griffin or Valraven. It will rather be something like Valkyria and Liseberg, smaller but packing the needed punch and still having a good layout after the drop. But we obviously also need an invert, right? And I'm jumping right back to B&M for an invert. This will be a pretty intense invert with some high forces through its inversions and helixes, an intense custom layout like Montu or Afterburn. This coaster is also the reason that I didn't go with a normal B&M looping coaster, because I simply think that they would be too similar to an invert. We've got about 4 coasters left, and another thing that I think every park really should have is a coaster with a good launch. I want this to be an intense coaster with focus on speed and positive forces, and what better model to do that with than an Intamin Blitz. I did first think of an Intamin accelerator like Desert Race at Heidi Park, but then remembered all the problems Intamin's hydraulic launch systems have. Besides, the Blitz is a much more up-to-date model that is capable of really fast-paced layouts with whippy transitions and forceful turns. This ride wouldn't have any inversions either, and would be similar to Terran in regards to layout, but would of course still be custom. As I mentioned earlier, this park needs some airtime. I have 2 particular coasters in mind for airtime experiences. The first one is specializing in floater airtime and a graceful experience, and I also want this to be a big coaster. I'm basically setting this up to be a B&M hybrid coaster, because it's just perfect for the job with its massive camelbacks and graceful flow, and it will also stand out in the park as the big, tall coaster. The other coaster would focus on ejector airtime, one that just goes boom, 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 I want airtime in my room, and hits hills non-stop. A short but intense experience, and after riding Piraten at Jer Summerland, there is no doubt that I would want this to be an Intamin Megalite. As many people say, more of these need to be purchased, and I would gladly do so for my park. Finally, I want this park to have one absolute standout coaster, one slightly bigger ride that has everything packed into it. A multi-purpose coaster that both provides serious positive forces, whippy laterals, powerful airtime, inversions, and maybe even some hang time. This would be the coaster people would travel for, and I have 2 models in mind, either a Mach Rise launch coaster or a Gerstlauer Infinity coaster. The Mach coaster can have extraordinary and versatile layouts, as showcased with such rides as Helix in Elisabeth and Star Trek Operation Enterprise in Movie Park Germany, while the Gers specializes in creativity. The Infinity coaster was designed to be able to do literally anything, and a perfect example of one that actually does everything I want this coaster to do is Der Schwur des Kernan in Hansa Park. Therefore, I think I'm gonna have to go with it. It's my favorite coaster model, and it just seems right to grab it and make something totally awesome with it. Something big and intense worth traveling for. Not taller than the B&M Hyper, but still pretty tall, long, and fast, and with both a launch and a lift hill just to spice things up. And let's just add a beyond vertical drop in there too, just to have that in the park as well. Alright, so it's finally time to move on to the rest of the rides, and I will go over these rather fast to save some time, and because I don't have as much to say about these rides. First up, we have some tame flat rides, a Ferris wheel, a Grand Carousel, and a teacups ride, as well as a chair swing. I also want a swing ride like either a pirate ship or an SNS screaming swing, and I'm just gonna add both, so we both have a family and a thrill swing ride. We also need some spinning flat rides, obviously, something like a classic Sierra Berg- und Talbahn, but also a Disco for the more nauseating experience by Semperla. And for the more thrilling riders working their way up to bigger rides, something like a Semperla Endeavor would be perfect. I also want a good inverting flat rides besides the Endeavor, specifically a Semperla Air Race, which is a fantastic flat ride type bringing fantastic hang time. And for a more self-controlled experience, I would definitely want a Gerstlauer Sky Roller, which would be for anyone not scared of 60-foot high towers. Now onto the big boys. Let's start out with a calm ride like an observation tower, and then for the more daring riders looking for good views, a Fun Time Starflyer is a great ride to get on and a must for my park. I also want another big tower, an Intamin Gyro Drop Tower. These towers are said to be some of the best due to their great rotating views and their incredibly forceful drops. But for the smaller rider group, a Semperla Family Tower is a good ride to go on. Back to the big rides, I have 2 left. The first is another must in my park, a big pendulum ride. This would be an Intamin Gyro Swing, which in my opinion is just the better version of the Semperla Giant Discovery. This gyro swing brings the size and the intensity. The last ride is another big thrilling flat, and even though this sounds crazy, I want a technical park Flying Fury. Only 2 of these have ever been built in real life, with the biggest and most intense one being Vertigo in Tivoli Gardens, and this might also be the best flat ride on Earth. It brings literally any force imaginable, and I want my park to have one. Next up, I have 3 water rides I want my park to have. The first is the classic log flume, and I specifically want it to be a terrain ride with great theming. Something like a Mach Ride's log flume would be great. It would have 2 drops, a small one and a major one. The second water ride would be a rapids ride, which is just as much of a must in my park as a log flume is, in my opinion. These rides are great for families and can give amazing immersive experiences with plenty of fun, so I would want it to have great theming and really heavy waves. This wouldn't be one of those raftings where you'd be unsure of how wet you'd get. No, you will definitely get wet on my rapids ride. As for the manufacturer, I was thinking something like Intamin, as they have made some of the best raftings in my experience. The best water ride I have ever tried was actually Fjord Rafting in Europa Park, which is an Intamin rapids ride. The final water ride would be a calm theming experience, a towboat style ride sailing through different worlds. I love the concept from Suluun in Bongbongland where you go through different regions of the world, and I'm going to rip that off and make it better. Sorry Bongbongland. Don't worry though, I won't use your characters. Finally, I have just 3 extra rides. One is a highly themed dark ride, not a shooting one, but one with great theming and an immersive experience. I haven't been on many great dark rides myself, and I don't know much about who makes the best ones, but I do know that the ones in Europa Park and in the Efteling should be amazing. So I try to go down the same road in regards to quality, even though that is a very high bar to reach. For the kids, I also want a safari ride, simply a jeep style ride between some animals to entertain the smaller group. And finally, I want a park tour ride, a ride that goes around the entire park, and I want it to be a classic train, as those are always so nice and add greatly to the experience of a park. So those are some of the rides I would absolutely want a park to have. There's obviously a lot more that could be added, but these are the rides that stood out to me. Keep in mind that this is not meant to be realistic, this is simply what I would find awesome. I hope you enjoyed, and I would love to hear some of the rides you would want in your park in the comments below. Otherwise, it has been Quarantine Rides, and I hope you all stay the fuck home.